Hey, it's Rodrigo here, and let's talk about sending MIDI with the Quad Cortex. Yes, the Quad Cortex can work as a MIDI controller and send MIDI messages, or just be in the signal chain and pass along the messages sent by other devices. But before getting into that, let's check the MIDI settings, because some of them can affect everything we are going to see later. So let's go to the menu, then Device Settings, and then MIDI Settings. And if you are working directly in the Quad Cortex, let's go to the menu, then Settings, and then MIDI Settings. The first configuration we have here is the MIDI channel, which is the channel where the Quad Cortex is going to receive the messages coming from other devices. Then we have the MIDI Thru. This is a really important one. It's here where we are going to define if the Quad Cortex is going to work as a MIDI controller or just pass along the messages coming from other devices. If this configuration is off, it means the Quad Cortex will send its own MIDI messages. And if it's on, the Quad Cortex is just going to pass along the messages from other devices. Then we have the MIDI over USB. The MIDI communication can be done using the MIDI or the USB ports of the Quad Cortex. If you are going to use the USB one, this configuration has to be on. But keep in mind that a few things like the MIDI Thru will not work through USB. Then there's the Ignore Duplicate PC. This one has more to do with the Quad Cortex receiving MIDI messages. If it's on, it means if the Quad Cortex receives a message for loading a preset which is already loaded, the command will be ignored. If it's off, the Quad Cortex will reload the preset. Then the MIDI Clock out. If you want the Quad Cortex to send MIDI Clock messages, this configuration has to be on. So let's do it. First, in a scenario where the Quad Cortex is going to work as a MIDI controller, meaning it's going to be the source of the MIDI messages. In the way I have it here, my computer is going to receive the message from the Quad Cortex via USB, and we are going to do some monitoring to check the results. So here in the Cortex control, let's go to check the MIDI settings just to confirm that the MIDI Thru is off and the MIDI over USB is on. Okay. So now let's go to the MIDI option down here. And if you are on the Quad Cortex screen, you have to go to the menu and preset MIDI out. So here we have the options of where we can configure the messages. Let's start with the Footswitches. Here we can create 12 messages per foot switch. So each time a foot switch is pressed, the messages will be triggered. So I'll create some random messages here for foot switch A, and then I'll do the same for foot switch B and C. These are just examples, of course, but in a real situation, the contents of these messages here would have to take in consideration the actions you want to happen in the other devices. So let's test. I'll monitor the messages using Google Chrome with this website midimonitor.com, but there are many other applications you can use for this. So each time I click on a foot switch, the message should show up there. Let's start with foot switch A. Nice. So if I click again, the messages will show again, and so on. So let's compare with the values we made at the configuration. Look fine. So I'll do the same for foot switch B. And also for foot switch C. That's cool. Okay, so keep in mind that each preset has its own MIDI configuration, so you have to save it every time you do any updates. So let's do it. Okay, and now let's configure the expression pedal. I'll select it here. Let's create a random message. And let's test it. So the message should show up there as I move the pedal here. That's cool. Another important thing here is that the messages configured for the Footswitches will work in Cine mode and Stomp mode only. On the preset mode, this message will not be triggered. As for the expression pedal messages, they will work in all modes. So now let's check the last option, the on-preset load messages. These messages are supposed to be triggered when the preset's loaded. So let's select here and do the configuration. Let's create a few messages. And let's test it. So I'll change the presets and go back so the messages are triggered. Yeah, that's cool. There's something weird here. There's a message in there which is not part of the ones we created. It seems to be the message I created for the expression pedal. And I don't know if it's a bug or if I'm not fully understand this behavior. But I think I'll try to contact neuraldsp and ask them about this. But let's go on. The Quad Cortex can also send MIDI Clock. So let's go back to the settings. So we can make the MIDI Clock messages enabled. I will select USB only here. And let's test. It should show here the messages as I change the configuration, the tempo configuration here in the Quad Cortex. That's fine. I can use the tap here too, or the slide bar only. That's cool. So now let's see a scenario where the Quad Cortex will only pass along the messages sent by other devices. I'm going to use the MIDI Chocolate Plus connected to the MIDI input of the Quad Cortex for sending the messages, and the Quad Cortex will pass along the messages to the computer. But this time I'm going to connect the Quad Cortex to my audio interface using a MIDI cable. So let's check the settings. I'm going to turn off the MIDI clock. I'm going to turn off the MIDI over USB and turn on the MIDI Thru. Okay, so let's test. As the chocolate is configured here, it should send CC messages using sequential codes like CC1, CC2, and so on. So let's check. I'll click the other Footswitches here. I'll send a few more messages. Yeah, that's cool. So I think this is it for this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time.